So you should be able to see on my screen well, I'm actually at an important page. So if you go to Climate, there's a support button. If you go to climate.com, there's a support link at the top of the page. And if you click support, or you go to support.climate.com, it takes you to what we call our Knowledge Center. There's a lot of information here in the Knowledge Center to help you find answers to questions that you may have about how the system works. And it's a great resource if you're wanting to sit down and figure some things out, if you're new to the platform and you want to just kind of get up to speed. Lots of short videos and things in here to make this happen and help you out. But one of the things I want to cover here initially is compatibility. Before you get ready to go for harvest this year, let's make sure that your combine is going to be compatible with the Climate Field View system, that you can, in fact, plug drive in and use it. And if you go to support.climate.com, or you go to climate.com and click the support tab at the top of the page to get here, there's this section here on compatibility down in the Knowledge Center topics. And if you click on compatibility, it's going to take you to a list of different articles that have to do with compatibility. And this first one on machine compatibility, if I hit more information, there is a link in here that says utilize our compatibility checker to determine if you need any adapter harnesses. So I'm going to go to this compatibility checker, and you can see that you can quickly find combines, is what we're talking about now. So I go over here to combines, and once I'm in combines, I can just tell it what kind of combine I'm running. And I can say, you know what, I've got a Case IH combine. And then it's going to take me to all the information that I need to know to understand if my Case IH combine is going to be compatible with FieldView Drive, and if it is, if there's any sort of special adapter cable or anything necessary. I can either read the information available here that will tell me the details of what I need to know, or I can actually go through this little clickable setup guide, and it'll say, hey, what make and model do you have? And oh, I've got a 10 series. And do you have a yield sensor on it? Yes, I've got the Case yield sensor. And what kind of monitor are you using? I'm using a Pro 700. And do you have auto guidance? And you say, yes, I've got the Case IH AccuGuide. And it will then say, congratulations, you are compatible, and the only thing you're going to need is FieldView Drive. If I needed an adapter cable, it would list that adapter cable here as well. So it's a few different tools here that are available for us to go ahead and get the information that we need about our compatibility. One other thing I'll mention here is when you go to this compatibility checker, there is a list at the bottom of the page that shows kind of in summary all of the combines that are compatible, as well as other equipment, whether it's a seeder or spreader or liquid applicator or things like that. The ones that are in white are currently compatible, so you can pretty quickly see that, hey, I've got a Case 120 series combine, it's going to be compatible. The ones in green are not yet compatible, but are coming soon. So you can see things like the Case mid-range rotary combines. Those are all coming online soon here. We're going to support those with 7.5, our next version of the software. But it's required that a Case actually has to make an update to their software for the Pro 700 monitor. And so though we will be compatible from our side with the Case equipment, until they do their update to the Pro 700 here, that's coming here in the next couple of weeks is what they tell us, those mid-range rotary combines won't be available. So sometimes it's work that we need to do. Sometimes it's work the manufacturer needs to do. And in this case, Case will be the limiting step there. They will need to come out and do an update to your Pro 700 to make that part functional. You can also see that like cotton pickers and strippers are coming here in the 7.5 release and will be supported. And we've got some silage cloth choppers and crone choppers that will be supported here this fall as well. We're just working out the final kind of details and quality control on those. But a number of resources here available for you to figure out, is my combine going to be compatible? And if so, might I need an adapter cable? And it's worth going through these checks here to make sure that you don't get ready to go at harvest and then all of a sudden find out that you need an adapter cable to make your combine work with the FieldView Drive system. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful. Again, that's at support.climate.com, or if you just go over to climate.com, our main webpage, you can click the support tab at the top of the page. It will take you to that Knowledge Center, and then just use the compatibility section to look up your particular combine configuration. And if you have questions or it's not making sense or you want to confirm anything, there's this live chat available on the website. You can click the live chat and get a support person to talk to through your computer. You can also call our 888-924-7475 number, speak to someone live, and they will also confirm or make sure that you get all your questions answered there as well. Okay. Next thing I want to talk about is getting your data into the system, and I'm not going to talk about this in a ton of detail right now, but if we're going to be using Drive at Harvest, getting harvest data is one step of the equation, but the more it helps a lot if you have your planting data in the system as well, so that as you're harvesting, the system knows what variety or hybrid you're in, and you can get some of the reports out of your harvest data that tell you what the aggregate performance of each hybrid was, or which hybrid won in a split planter trial. All this data will come to you automatically if you have your planting data in the system, so that we know what varieties were planted where. Now, getting data into the system is a whole nother webinar, and if you're interested in that, go to climate.com/webinars and sign up for one of my data inbox webinars. But in short, if you again, here on the support page, there's this section called My Data. And if you go to My Data, you can go ahead and there's a whole bunch of articles in here on how to get data out of all kinds of different systems. How do I get my data out of my John Deere? How do I get my data out of Ag Leader Infinity? How do I get my data out of a Kinsey Vision display? Wherever your data exists today, field boundaries, planting files, those are important things to have in the system before we start harvesting. If we don't have our field boundaries in there, at least, it's a lot harder for us to get started with collecting our harvest data because we don't have those field boundaries that exist. It's possible, especially if you're doing something like custom combining for someone. But in general, you want to have your field boundaries in the system before you start harvesting. You also want to have your as planted files in the system before you start harvesting. So use the information here on the support page under My Data to learn how to import your data, or join one of my my webinars on how to use Data Inbox and get up to speed there. Okay. The last thing I'm going to show you here online before we get into the app on the iPad itself is how to correct your data. So there's one thing about getting data into the system, get your planting data in there, but certainly there are times when the data that was collected at planting is maybe not as clean as it should be. And maybe you got the wrong variety, maybe you got the wrong crop, someone, fat-fingered something into the monitor, and you've got the same variety that's spelled 3 different ways. A lot of this can make the yield analysis at the end of the season difficult. And so we built in some tools that allow you to fix your data. I'm just going to show you where those are. So I'm going back over to my Climate account. So I went to climate.com on the web. I logged in. And this is the page that you see. If you go to climate.com and you log in on the web, which some of you may never have done if you've only used our mobile apps, but you can go to climate.com on the web and log in. It's preferred that you use Google Chrome as your browser. If you log in to climate.com on the web using Internet Explorer or Safari or Firefox or some other browser, it will probably work, but there are definitely some mapping applications that work better in Chrome. And we certainly have seen cases where Internet Explorer has problems handling them, especially if you're on an older version. So we always recommend that you download and install Google Chrome as a browser on your computer and use that when using climate.com. It will give you the best experience. So I'm here logged in at climate.com to my account. And what I was going to talk about here is that fixing of data. So before we get in the combine, we want our planting data to be as clean as possible and have the right information so that as we're harvesting, we're able to generate reports that are meaningful and that are going to tell us a story of what worked and what didn't on our farm. And so when I'm logged in here, there's something up here in the upper right-hand corner where I can go to Settings and I can go to Fix Data. And if I go to Fix Data, it'll take me to this page here that shows, okay, these are all your fields, and I can choose a year, 2008, what year data do I want to fix? And probably what I want to fix right now is my most recent data, the data from 2018. And do I want to fix my planting files or my harvest files? Well, I want to fix my planting files, make sure that all that data is correct. And what you'll see is you'll see a list of all your fields. You'll see the crop type that your planting data told us was in that field. It shows us the date that it was planted, and it shows us the hybrid that's in that field. So as I go down this list, if I see something that doesn't look right, and it's just a good page to come to review it, I could look at it and say, oh, you know what, this particular, this DAD 60, it says it was wheat planted on 9/14 of 17 to west bred 4462. That's not right. I can put a check mark next to it. I can hit this edit button at the top right of the page, and then it says, what do you want to replace? Do you want to replace the crop? Maybe it's not wheat at all. Maybe that's wrong, and it's something else. Or maybe it's just the hybrid that needs to be corrected. I come in here and say, you know what, the hybrid that needs to be corrected, it was Westbred 4462. Now what it really was in that field, and I can start typing the name of a new hybrid, and it should search our seed catalog. But then you come in here and you say, well, let's see if I can get should search the seed catalog and get you to, or you can just type it in what it should be. Oh, that's not right. Whatever it is in there, pick that hybrid and replace it, and it will fix your planting map to update it to a particular hybrid that should have been the one that was in that field. And so this works both to either correct a hybrid, or maybe one guy put it in as Westbred 4462, and the other guy put it in as lowercase WB 4462. This is a good way to get all your hybrids all in one format, so that when you do harvest and you're looking for reporting on yield by hybrid, yield by variety, those values will be consistent, and you'll get better reporting across all your data about how hybrid performance or variety performance worked on your farm. So it's worth it to take the time to go in here and review. And again, to do this, you go to Settings and Fix Data. And when you go to Settings and Fix Data, you'll be able to see all, and you choose 2018 as the year in the upper right-hand corner. You'll be able to see all your fields, what date they were planted, what crop we think they were planted to, according to the data that you imported or you have in your system, and what hybrid is in those fields. And just make sure all that is correct. And if any of it's incorrect, you should be able to update it here. Okay. That said, I am going to actually get into the CAB app itself and start talking about how we can get ready for harvest once we got all our data in a good place. So let me see if I can get my iPad to display on the screen here. Let's see. Stop sharing that. Let me see if I can share the iPad. Okay, so in a second here, I'm hoping that you guys can see my, oh, it doesn't look like it's sharing quite right. Let me get the technology working here. Okay, now I believe you guys can see my iPad. Let's just pull this up. Okay, so you should be able to see my iPad on the screen there. And what I want to start with first are a couple of things. What app do we need? We need something called the Climate Field View CAB app. And it is the one at the bottom of my screen on the left-hand side. It's got a white background, a gray F, and the word CAB. If you don't have this installed on your iPad, search for it in the App Store. Go to the App Store and search for Climate Field View. Two apps are going to come up. There's what we call the black app and the white app. Install them both. You're going to want both of them on your iPad, but the one that you use in the field when you're collecting data, and the one that we're going to talk about today, is the white app, that Field View CAB app. And so you can find it in the App Store and install it and be ready to go. The next thing that you want to do is you want to be able to make sure that you can actually connect to your CAB app. So one of the things you have to do on your iPad is make sure that Bluetooth is on, because the way that the Field View Drive communicates with the CAB app is via Bluetooth. And it's kind of like if you have a truck with a Bluetooth system. The first time you get a new truck or the first time you get a new phone, you have to pair that phone to the truck so that they know each other. And once they're paired, then every time you jump in the truck and turn it on, they automatically connect, and you can start making calls as you need to. This is the same way with the Field View Drive in your iPad. We need to pair them, and once they know each other, then every time they get in range, every time they both have power and they're in the same space, they're going to start communicating automatically. So there's a one-time step of setting up your iPad or setting up your drive so that it pairs with the iPad. And in order for that to happen, Bluetooth needs to be on. So the way this works here is I'm going to go over to Settings, and inside of Settings on my iPad, I'm going to check on the left-hand side. There's a section called Bluetooth, and I'm going to check and make sure that that's on. And if I do have that on, which I do in this case, then the next thing is I need to go ahead and I need to plug my drive in. And now my drive and my iPad already know each other. So as soon as I plug this drive in, they're going to pair, and I'm not going to do anything else. But if I go ahead, I'm going to plug it in here. I've got a power connection here. I'm going to plug in my drive, and it's going to flash some lights at me, some green lights and some blue lights, and it's going to start sending a signal. And what you might have noticed on my screen there is I've got a device on there called Hamlin that now says connected. That's my drive. I plugged them in. They're in range of each other. And they started talking automatically. Now, if you're doing this for the first time, when you plug your drive in, it's going to show up in that Other Devices section at the bottom of the page on the right-hand side here. And once you get it plugged in and it's in that Other Devices, you'll have to tap on it and say you want to make a Bluetooth connection to that device. Then it will move it up to My Devices. It will connect, and you should be pretty ready to go at that point. So this is something you're going to want to do and take the time to do here before you get started with Harvest. Just take your iPad out to some piece of machinery. It doesn't matter what piece of machinery it is, as long as it has a CAN port that you can plug the drive into. Plug it in, have your iPad there, make the Bluetooth connection so that then when it comes harvest time, they're already going to know each other. And as soon as you plug that drive into the combine and you have your iPad there with you, they will start communicating immediately. But make sure you get that Bluetooth connection between the two before you get started here this fall. Okay, so now that that's installed, let's go ahead and I'm going to go over to the Cab app. And I'm going to launch the Cab app. And before we get into the actual, like, how do I start collecting harvest data, let me show you one other thing that may be helpful as to help make sure that you are collecting good data and able to do something with that data at the end of the season. We talked about how to import, or briefly talked about how to import your as-planted maps that may be in your 2630 or your Pro 700 or in SMS or My John Deere or Apex or wherever they may be. If you have as-planted maps available and those maps are in an electronic format that can be imported to Climate Field View, you should do that. That's the best way to get planting maps in. But there certainly are situations where you have as-planted maps that you have fields where there are no as-planted maps because you were planting with a grain drill, a dumb grain drill that didn't have a rate controller, or you're planting with a ground-driven planter that, again, doesn't have a rate controller, and so there just is no electronic as-planted map anywhere. If you're in that situation, you can create as-planted maps in the Cab app here so that you have a planting map for the combine to refer to as it's pulling through the field, as long as the field was planted to a single variety at a single population on a single date. Let me show you how that works. So, and feel free to follow along if you've got the Cab app there. If you go into Settings, and in Settings you go into Data, there's a section in the upper right-hand corner that says Add Activity. I can come in here and I can say I want to add an activity. It's going to say, well, what do you want to do? And this is basically a way you can create a flat rate map for anything on any field. So I could build a planting map, a tillage map, I could build a as-applied map, a fertility map, a lot of different things that I can do here to create flat rate maps where I don't have an electronic data file to import. But if I go in here and I say next and I say, okay, well, I want to create a planting map for one of these fields where I don't have an electronic planting map available. I'm going to say that, hey, this Visalia field. Next, select the equipment. I just have to pick a piece of equipment that could have done the job that I'm going to do. So if I'm talking about a corn field, I'll want to pick a planter. If I'm talking about a wheat field, I want to pick an air seeder. It doesn't have to be the actual device that did it. It just needs to be a piece of equipment that could have done that activity. So I'll just pick this first planter here, and I'll say, you know what did we do on this field? We planted at 34,000 seeds an acre. And then what did we put in the field? I'll pick a hybrid. I'll say that, hey, we had 5345 in this field. And then what date did it go in? Well, I planted it back in April 9th of 2018. Hit next. When I hit the add button here, it's going to create an as planted map for that field. So this is a field where I didn't have an electronic as planted map because maybe I planted it with some old ground drive planter or something that, you know, didn't have a rate controller on it, and it didn't have electronics the way that my more modern stuff does. But I've just gone ahead and created a planting map. I now have, if I can remember which field I did, if I go over to map here, you'll see it. I can go pick the Visalia field, Visalia, here it is. No, let me see if I can get here it is, planting, hybrid. There it is. There's my as planted map of DeKalb 5345. We basically just filled in the boundary, the field boundary, with planting data for that field. So now, when I harvest it, that harvest data is automatically going to know that, hey, it's 5345 in this field, and so it'll put the data in the right place and all the different kinds of reporting in the field view system. So this may be helpful, but again, don't do this if you have an electronic planting map that you can import. That's always better to get the real planting data where there is variability in some of the populations as you went through the field, and there's little spots that you planted around or did things in where it's not quite as flat and simple as this map makes. But if you don't have an electronic version, go ahead and build these as planted maps for your fields before you get into harvest here, and that will again help with the harvest analysis at the end of the season. Okay, now that said, so let's get back into getting ready for harvest. So what we have to do first, if we're going to get ready for harvest, is we have to build a combine. We have to tell the cab app what kind of equipment we're going to be driving through the field in, collecting harvest data. So if you've never done this before, or even if you have, let's go through it quickly, and certainly feel free to follow along on your iPads. But if I click on the equipment button here on the main page of the cab app, you can see that I've actually got a lot of equipment already set up here, but there's an option here to add new equipment, and that button should exist on all of your iPads. So go ahead and choose the add new equipment button, and it's going to ask you what you want to build. And you can build tractors, planters, air seeders, sprayers, combines, cotton harvesters, anhydrous applicators, tillage implements, lots of different pieces of equipment that you can build that you might have on your farm. We're talking here about harvest. I'm not going to do a cotton harvester yet because I think most of the people here on the phone were talking about grain at least first. So let's pick a combine is what I want to build. I'll hit next. It'll ask me my combine make, and you can see all the different supported makes that are here in the system. And so I'm going to say that I'm building a John Deere combine. I'm going to hit next. It's going to ask me what series. It's an S series. What model? S680. And I'll give it a name. This is my S680 combine. Note that if you're an operation that has maybe 3 or 4 of the same combines, you do need to build 3 or 4 copies of that combine here on the equipment page, because each one will be used by an individual operator. They'll basically come in and they'll plug in Drive, and it'll ask them, what piece of equipment are you in? And they're going to have to choose the S680 combine number 1. And as soon as they're in that one and that one's being used, then the next guy who gets in S680 combine number 2, he can't choose the exact same piece of equipment. He's going to have to choose the next one. And so make sure that if you are running multiple combines that are the same make and model number, you build enough copies here that everyone can access one as they're going through the field. But I'm going to go ahead and hit next here. It says you're almost done. You just have a couple things left to do. So when you finish typing in or defining your combine, there's a couple of things that it's going to ask you about where the GPS is on that machine and some other different offsets and things. So first, most combine models, we know where the GPS is when it comes out of the factory. And so these measurements here about how far offset the GPS is from the front of the combine, from the center of the front wheel to the location where the GPS is mounted on the hood, it should be 78 inches on an S680. But what you'll want to do is go out to the machine shed and take a tape measure with you and just verify that these measurements are correct, they're in the ballpark, and that your GPS isn't in some different location. And it should be right unless you've moved it or something weird has happened. But I eyeball these, make sure 78 inches looks like it's about right. You can see the measurements here on the screen, what measurements we're taking. There's a height measurement from the ground to where the GPS is located, and there's a centering measurement. Is that GPS centered on the combine, or is it offset to the right or offset to the left at all? But again, these measurements should be correct. This is how the machines come out of the factory. Just check them and make sure that there's nothing different there. Now, once we've got our measurements set for our GPS, the next thing on the left-hand side of the page, we need to define some heads. So I've got some defined already. You may have a blank slate here, and if you do, it's pretty easy to add a new head, and you're probably going to want to build both a corn head or a row crop head and a platform head for beans, for wheat, or some of the other crops there. So you'll want to build one of each kind of head so that depending on what you're harvesting, you can equip your combine properly. So I'm going to come in here and hit Add New Head, and we'll go through what this screen looks like. Basically, the first thing it says is, okay, what head type is it? Is it a row crop head or is it a platform head? Well, let's start by building a row crop head. How many rows or sections do you have? I'm going to say I've got a 12-row head, but you can define it obviously based on the number of rows that you have. We'll skip this next section, but then there's some measurements there about the forward distance, the row spacing, and the head offset. So the forward distance, as it says in text there, is from the front axle to the cutting edge of the head. How far is that distance? And this 188 inches will probably be pretty close, but it really depends on what brand head you have on there, and take your tape measure and attach the head and see what that distance is and update it here. Then there's your row spacing. Is it a 30-inch head? Probably, but if you've got a different spacing on your head there, you would update it there. And if there's a head offset, most of them are center cut, but there are options to have offset right or offset left heads. You'd have to update that. Now the part in the middle there that I skipped, that current height and that max harvesting height, if this is set to disabled, you're not going to collect any data as you're harvesting. You need to set a max harvesting height. There's a little question mark here that kind of tells you what this is. Max harvesting height is the threshold that determines whether the combine head is lifted or lowered. The combine will stop mapping and accumulating acres anytime the head height is above the max harvesting height. So the way this works is, as you're in the field and you're harvesting, you have the head down and you're chopping, and then when you get to the end of the row and you lift the head, we don't want to map acres anymore, because then you're in a non-harvesting condition. And we don't want to say that, hey, as you're making that turn at the end of every row, we're going to add those acres into the total acres harvested. That's a non-harvesting condition. And so we want to make sure that there's a threshold set here that anytime the head goes above X percent, goes above 40%, goes above 45% lifted, whatever the number is, we're going to assume that you're not harvesting anymore. And so you want to set this based on what your non-harvesting height of your head is. There's that button you push to lift the head. What height does it go to that is going to be your non-harvesting height? And the way you do this is actually you get into the cab, you have the drive connected, you have the head on the combine, and just go ahead and lift your head to its non-harvesting height. Our system is going to read. See where it says current height 100? Well, I'm not really connected to a combine right now, but if I was, it would be reading the head height coming off the machine in real time. I would lift my head to my non-harvesting height, and I would see that current height number change to whatever it is on my combine, and then I would click the set button. If I click the set button, see it says lift the head to the raised position and tap next, and I'm not really attached to a combine, so it can't do it right here, but you click that set, you raise the head to the non-harvesting position, you hit next, and it will take whatever value is coming off your combine and set that as the max harvesting height, so that every time you lift that height, we move to a non-harvesting condition, and we stop collecting data so we get accurate acres coming off of your field. Pretty simple, but something you'll want to do when you are in the cab with the head attached to get the right harvesting height set there. So I've gone ahead and I've got a corn head here. I can say done. Same thing, I would go in here and I would build a platform head. I can build a platform head. It's almost exactly the same. The only difference here is the number of swath sections that you're going to choose. Just leave this one to the maximum number that it allows here. This basically says, hey, as I'm harvesting, if I've got harvesting a point row and I've got swath coverage in this field, this will help the system know when I've got a lot of sections here that I'm only using a portion of the head, and it will map the data appropriately versus say, hey, whatever yield I'm harvesting is coming from the full width of the head, even though I've already harvested most of this, and it is, in fact, just a point row that I'm harvesting. The other difference here is on head width. You're gonna have to put in, instead of the number of rows, you're putting in the head width. What's the width of your bean head or your wheat head, whatever it is, in inches? So with that, I can hit done, and I've got a platform head as well. And then when you get in the combine, you'll just make sure that you have the appropriate head enabled. There's a couple other settings on the left-hand side that aren't that important. This is one you generally will not mess with. Shared swaths should be on unless for some reason you don't want it on, but that allows multiple combines in the same field to see where each other have been and collect harvest data appropriately. The flow sensor lag is usually going to be about 14 seconds. That's the amount of time it takes from crop hitting the head to making it through to the mass flow sensor in the combine. Usually it takes about 14 seconds, but if you're seeing weird patterns in your harvest data, some zippering, that may indicate that you need to adjust your flow sensor lag a bit because grain is moving either faster or slower through your combine, and by the time it gets to that mass flow sensor. One of the new things we added here this year is this adjust GPS location. We know that depending on what kind of GPS system you have available to you on the farm, there can be GPS drift. And if you're lining up to harvest like a test plot where you had very specifically planted rows to different varieties, and you're lining up to harvest it, and on the map it looks like, hey, my combine's not in the right place. This isn't going to be the harvesting, putting all the data in the right place. You can use these buttons to move your GPS location 4 inches to the east and 1 inch to the north or 2 inches to the north. You can use these buttons to adjust your GPS location as necessary to make sure that you do line up properly as you go to harvest that field if you've had any GPS drift since you planted in the spring. And the crop settings, again, is something you can leave alone in most cases here. But that's about it for setting up a combine. So when I've got all those in and I hit done, I now have a new piece of equipment there that's ready to go. And it's probably in here. It is my S680 combine. So I can go in here, and I'm connected to Drive still. I'm sitting here connected to Drive. I can say set it as active, and it says, do you want to make that the active combine? And I say yes. It moves to the top of the screen, and it's got a green checkbox next to it, and I am ready to start harvesting with this S680 combine with the parameters set that I just built. Now, one of the things that I'll have you take a look at now, because I'm on this screen, is Remote View. Remote View is a function that allows anyone to view what is going on in a particular combine or planter or sprayer, anything that's equipped with Field View Drive. If that piece of equipment has a cell signal in the field, anyone who you choose to let look can log in and see in real time what's happening in the field and where you are and how things are going. They can see your screen on the cab app if they have an iPad that they're at. And the way this works is there's a little farmer icon in the upper right-hand corner of the screen with a magnifying glass. And if I click that, all I do is I type in the FieldView username of the person that I want to look at, and I hit search, and it'll show me all of their equipment that's currently connected. Now, I imagine some of you on the phone have your iPads there, and so if someone wants to try this, my username is here at the bottom of the screen. It's Jeff plus red nucleus at climate.com. So if you want to try that, if you go to your equipment page on your iPad right now and hit that little farmer icon and type in Jeff plus red nucleus at climate.com, hopefully someone on the phone can do that, and you'll see what it looks like when a request comes in to look at your, and I'll just go back and show you what that username is. It's Jeff plus red nucleus at climate.com. And if someone wants to type that in to their iPad on the remote view function there, you should see in a second here that a request will pop up saying, hey, someone wants to view your screen. Do you want to let them view it? And then you, as the operator of the combine, have the opportunity to say either yes or no. And so this can work so that you know, your brother-in-law can see where you are, and if you're going to need to be, you know, where you should bring lunch to, or if your agronomist needs to see where you are and how things are going, they can log in and view in real time what's going on the operation as you are in the combine without having to make a call and ask what the numbers look like. They can see it in real time. I don't know if it looks like no one has actually sent me a request, so we'll just keep moving on. But if anyone wants to at any point, again, go to equipment, go to that farmer in the magnifying glass, type in Jeff plus red nucleus at climate.com, and it'll come up, and we can show people how that works. Okay. Next, let's go to some of the settings. The settings page has a variety of things on it that we should talk through just to make sure you know how these things work. So if we go back to the home screen and we go to settings, let's see, what do we want to cover first? Well, on the left-hand side of the page here, and we're right now in the general section, most of this stuff you want to leave it as is. But there's a new feature here called restricted mode, where if you are, maybe you're the farm manager, you're the farm owner, you've got some hired hands working in the combines, in the planters, using the cab app, you may want to turn on restricted mode so that they can, the only thing they can do while they're there is collect data, and they can't mess with any of the existing data in your system. So if I was to go over and click enable on restricted mode, it tells me that, okay, put your field view password in, and now users of this iPad will not be able to delete fields, delete equipment, delete field pins or field regions. They won't be able to make edits to any of that equipment either, or make any yield adjustments. It might be a nice safety feature to put on just so that someone who is not familiar with the software doesn't accidentally do something they shouldn't be doing, and all that they can do when they're in the field is collect data. So just an option there to be aware of in case you want to turn that on for your operators. What else? Another good one here is this second option here of data. When I go to the data tab, at the bottom of the page, it shows me the available space that I have on my iPad. And you never want to run out of space while you're in the field. So before you start harvest here, go to all of your iPads that you're going to be using in the combines, go to this data tab and check what your available data is. If you're down to 2 or 3 gigs of data, you're going to want to delete things off of your iPad that you don't need. Delete pictures, delete photos, delete apps that you're not using anymore. You know, find a way to free up space, because if you run out of space while you're in the field combining, the whole app is just going to shut down, and it's not going to let you do anything else until you make some space available on that iPad, and you're going to lose harvest data. So make sure that you have space before you get started, and every couple of days, check it and see if, am I still good? Do I have things available? I mean, in my case, I have 91 gigs available, so I could harvest for, tens of thousands of acres, and I wouldn't run out of space. But if you're down in that less than 10, see how quickly it's going away as you're moving through the fields this harvest, and make sure that if you are running out of space, you do free some up. Okay, this devices section, this is where you can see which drive you're currently connected to. There are times when if you've got the drive plugged in and it looks like Bluetooth is on and everything's connected, but you're still not, you're not seeing your combine on the map, sometimes you have to come to this page and tap the drive to connect. Sometimes I'll come to this page and it'll say tap to connect. So just be aware that if you're not seeing something, try this devices page and make sure you have the green checkbox or check mark here. The other thing, the rest of this left-hand side of the page is not relevant for harvest. The only thing that is the notifications section. So if I go down to notifications, I've got a couple different options here. I can put in an email address in the email report section there. And if I have this box checked on field change, I'm going to get an email every time that a combine moves to a new field. And this is just a kind of a nice passive way to stay on top of how harvest is progressing. I may not be the person in the combine, but if I want to keep track of, when guys are finishing fields and moving on to the next one, I can just get an email as soon as the combine moves from one field to the next, so I can understand what's happening out there without having to constantly be on the phone and asking those questions. And if getting an email on every field is too much, I could check the box for daily, and then just at the end of the day, I'll get a report that says, hey, combine number 1 went into fields 2, 3, 4, and 5, and combine number 2 went into fields 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. You'll just get this daily summary that tells you which fields each combine harvested that day. The other one here at the bottom is text alerts. Oh, and here, so someone tried that remote view connection that I was talking about before. This is what it looks like for the operator. The operator gets a note that says, hey, Mark Jensen's attempting to begin to make a real remote view connection. Would I like to allow it? It's always up to the operator to say yes or no here. And so I can say, yeah, I'm going to allow him to look at my screen. And then if I was in the field harvesting, he would be able to see my harvest map as I was pulling this field in real time. And he would also be able to see where I was in that field. Am I almost done? Do I have a lot to go? Just kind of check in and see how it's going. Now, one point I'll make about the remote view function there is you would, it's not something you want to keep up all day. It's not something that you would want to log into from the office and say, okay, I'm going to watch this combine move in real time all day long, unless you have an unlimited data plan, because it is a bit of a data hog. I mean, it is basically, it's like streaming a movie between yourself and the combine. It's a live feed of the actual data coming through. The combine is sending it via cell signal to your iPad, and so it's a pretty data intensive thing. So what I tend to see or recommend most people do is use the remote view function to log in for a few minutes, get the information you need. How's the harvest going? How far along are you in this field? What are the numbers looking like? And then log out and disconnect and reconnect later if you need to check anything else, but probably not leave it running all day long. Anyway, here on the alerts, the last thing I was going to say here was you can set up these text alerts for different things that may be happening in the field. And with combines, what we're generally talking about is moisture. So I can say add a new alert setting and harvest. What I want to do is tell me if corn moisture is ever greater than, and you can set a threshold, 27%. Hit done. I now have I'll get a text alert to the phone number that I've put in there if there's more than 5 acres of crop that are coming out of a particular field that are greater than 27% moisture. So this can help with some of my logistics. If maybe, if I'm getting wet corn coming out of a particular field and I need to send it to a different location, I don't have to kind of stay on top of that and be making calls to the operator and asking him what it looks like. If he's harvesting corn that's coming out wetter than 27%, I'm going to get a text alert. I'm going to know it, and I can then start making plans from there. And there's not this possibility of miscommunication or not seeing it. I'm just going to get this proactive notification from the machine itself. The machine's going to tell me that I've got wet corn coming out and I want to put it, and then I can make the decision about what to do about that. So feel free to set up those text alerts. As you can see on harvest, there's a few of them. It's corn moisture less than, soybean moisture greater than, soybean moisture less than, and corn moisture greater than. It's greater than or less than certain moistures on corn, soybeans, and wheat. Okay, moving on from there, let's show you what it looks like in the cab itself when you're harvesting. So when you're harvesting, so I've got my piece of equipment set up, and when I go to equipment, I can see that I've got the right piece of equipment chosen. I'm in the S680 combine, and the check box is there. So then when I'm ready to go, where I go to is I go to the map screen. So I click on maps. It shows me, how I know that I'm connected is in the upper right-hand corner. I've got a little picture of a combine and that little far right-hand corner button in the upper right-hand side there. Now I pick a field. So I say, you know what, and what field am I harvesting? I'm going to harvest the Archer field. And I click on it, and it says, do you want to make this the active field? Now, this is one way that the system works. You can just go to the list at the top of the page and choose the field that you're entering and make it active. But the way that your cab app is set up by default is that it will sense GPS boundaries. So it'll say, okay, you just pulled into the Archer field. Do you want to make this the active one? So you shouldn't have to select fields if you have field boundaries existing. Your iPad will prompt you based on GPS location. It'll say, I know which field you just entered, and it'll just ask you to confirm that you want to make it the active field. And I say, yes, I want to make it the active field. And then it's going to go ahead and do this head height thing because I didn't set a head height on this particular thing. And I say, yeah, let's set head height. Unfortunately, because I'm connected to this fake iPad or this fake head, it's not going to let me do this. I'm not really connected to a combine here in my office in San Francisco, so it's not going to let me get this done quite right. Okay, so anyway, there I am. There's my combine in the field, and you can see that it's kind of pretending that it's driving through this field. But this is kind of what it looks like when you are in the cab. There's a bunch of panels on the left-hand side, and if I was collecting data, it would be giving me real-time feedback about what my yield was, what my moisture was, how many acres I'd harvested, and things like that. The red bars at the bottom of the page, this is an 8-row corn head that I've got attached here, and you can see that they're all red, meaning none of the rows are harvesting. If I was actually harvesting crop here, they would all be green, or if I was in a point row, some of them would be green, the others would be red. But you can kind of keep track of which rows of the head are engaged using those red bars at the bottom of the page. If I want to change any of the panels or the metrics on the left-hand side of the page, you can go ahead and do that with the Edit button. There's an Edit button on the lower left. But if I click it, it has a bunch of different metrics that I could choose to slide over as the ones that I see by default while I'm harvesting. So maybe I want to be able to drop pins as I'm harvesting, and I don't really care about my load pounds. I can come in here and just swap that out, and now drop pin is one of the buttons that I have on that left-hand side of the page. So as I'm pulling through the field, harvesting, if I see something I want to mark, I can very quickly drop a pin using that button. You can see the harvest is going along now in this demonstration that I've got here. Yes, it knows I'm not really in that field, so I'm going to say that yes. But you can see what harvest looks like. This is typical here when I'm harvesting, that you see the combine and there's a gap between you and the data that's being collected. That's that 14-second lag, that when you harvest crop and you cut corn, it takes 14 seconds for that corn typically to make it through the combine into the mass flow sensor where it can be measured. So don't worry when you're harvesting if you see this gap, that's normal, because we want to put the data in the right place in the field where it was actually harvested, not where it finally got measured 14 seconds later. So you can watch yourself go through the field. Let's see what else we want to cover here. You know, I don't have a planting map in here, so it's the harvesting crop. It says it doesn't know what it is, but as long as I had a planting map in here ahead of time, it would say my harvesting crop is corn and the variety is DeKalb 5356 or whatever it is. It'll show you on the screen what you have. So the key thing is for the operator of the iPad who is doing the harvesting, there is literally one button they need to push when they enter each field. The iPad's going to prompt them and say, hey, it looks like you've entered the home field. Do you want to make this the active field? They hit yes, and they go. It's a one-button push for every field to collect data using Tab app in the Combine. It's a very, very simple system, and it should be easy to use for whoever is operating the Combine. They will push one button in each field just to confirm that that is the field that they've entered. Let me see what else I want to show you here. Let's do one other thing that you might want to use, another feature is this loads feature. So as I'm pulling through the field, if I am, maybe I've got a test plot in the field and I want to separate that data into different loads, I can use this load functionality to come in here and say, you know what, I have a new load and what do I want to call it? This is, this is where the test fungicide went on. And if I do this, I give it a name, it will then segregate my data and say, okay, until you press the load button again, we're going to take all of the harvest data and put it into this test fungicide bucket. And then when you stop it, when you finish up that section and you want to switch, hit new load, and then it'll start putting data into another bucket. So this is a way to kind of segregate your data out in addition to the normal segregations that we're going to do, which are yield by hybrid, yield by variety, yield by population, all the different things we know about from the planting map. But if you want to split data up in some different ways that you can refer back to, use the load function to do that. Let's see, I think that's about it for the actual what it looks like in the cab while you're harvesting. Again, very simple. All the operator needs to do is tell us what variety what field he's in as he's harvesting, and the data will get collected automatically, that one button push. As the person is moving through the field, he can see things like, well, he can do some reporting and some things like that. He can split the screen and say, hey, I can see my harvest map on one side. Let me look at the as-planted map on the other side so I can see what my populations were or things like that. In this case, I don't have an as-planted map for me to look at, but you can put different things up there by using the split screen button on the right-hand side of the page to see two maps at once. Okay, that said, let's go and look at a couple other things that may be helpful here. And I'm going to disconnect from Drive so I can show you some of the other things you might want to do after you're done harvesting to help clean up your data and get it in good shape. So I disconnected my drive, and so once I've finished harvesting, let's go ahead and look at this first. I got to get back to my iPad has to recognize that I've disconnected drive. It might take a second here. If I go to map, and I pick a field that has some harvest data, I think I've got some under this Elkhorn Creek field. Yeah. So this is a harvest map from 2016. But regardless, if I get to the point where I have a harvest map in the cab, and maybe I've got scale tickets that tell me my true weights that I took out of this field. On the right-hand side of the screen there next to the house, there's a little button with an arrow on it. If I click that one, there's an option to look at my harvest summary. So if I look at the harvest summary for this field, it tells me that, hey, you harvested 122 acres, 1.85 million wet weight pounds, 19% moisture, 31,000 dry bushels, and a 259 bushel average. That's the data that came directly off, or actually in this case I've already edited it. But what that section will show you is the data that came directly off the combines in that field as we were passing through it. Now, if I have scale tickets from this field that tell me, you know what, the actual weight that came off the field was 1.925 million pounds, I can update this and do a post-harvest calibration of the yield data in this field so that I've got all the correct data flowing through all my systems, even if my combines weren't quite calibrated correctly. How do I do that? Well, as it says here, tap to adjust the yield. If I tap this, I can edit any of these numbers that are on this screen to match my scale tickets. So I come in here and I say, and you can see I've already edited this once. It was the stuff that came off the combine was 1.928, and I had edited it down to 1.85 million. But I could edit it back up and say, you know what, it's actually 1.925 million pounds. And I hit done. That will readjust everything. I can adjust moisture, I can adjust wet weight, I can adjust dry bushels, I can adjust harvested acres. It will adjust the yield as appropriate and give me a new yield map. It'll rescale the yield map based on the change that I've just made. I didn't make a very big change there, so you didn't see the yield map update. But if I come in here and make a bigger change and I say, you know what, the actual weight that came off of this field was only 1 million pounds, you're going to see a big change. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, done. Now my yield went from 259 to 270, and you can see my my yield changed dramatically, and my yield map has updated accordingly. If you do an update like this and the yield map is now out of scale, so to speak, in terms of the key, I can click on the legend here, I can hit edit, and I can use, there's always an auto adjust button. If I click auto adjust, it'll rescale my entire map to the appropriate color scale so that I can see the variability in there. I can hit done, and it'll bring my map back to a place where it makes some sense versus, hey, it's all one color because my yield numbers have moved so much. But let me go back and just put my my yield number back to. I'll do that later. Okay, so that's how you can adjust post-harvest yield adjustment of some of your harvest data if you have scale tickets that you want to adjust to. The last thing I think I'm going to show here, and again, any questions people have about anything, please type those in. I'll get to those in just a second here because I'm showing one last thing. If you are doing custom harvesting for someone, a lot of times you won't have a field boundary as you're doing custom harvesting for them. So that's a situation where you're going to pull up to a field and the system won't auto-prompt you and say, hey, I think you're in the home field. Do you want to make this the active field? So how do we make this work? Well, what we do here is we're going to go, if you're going to do any custom harvesting for someone, you go over to the map section, or not the map section, sorry. Go to the fields section on the home page, and you'll have all your fields on the left-hand side, but there's this option here to add new field. So if I click add new field, I can create one. This is, you know, Bob's field. I'm doing custom harvesting for him. Oh, that didn't say Bob. Bob's field. And you give it a name. The client name is CJ Farm Partners, and the farm name is example, whatever. Give it a client farm field designation, and hit add. And what you'll see is that on the left-hand side of the page now, I have this field called Bob's field that has a question mark where the field boundary should be. Basically, I don't know what shape this field is, and I don't know where it is. But if I was going to custom harvest it, I've now built the field. It exists in my system. I just don't know anything about it. So now when I go to harvest, I can go ahead and let me plug my drive back in here. See if I can get my drive to connect. Once it does, I'll show you what you do as so my drive's connected. Okay, make sure I have the right piece of equipment. Yep, I've got a combine selected here. So now I go over to map. I select a field. Bob's field is in here with that little question mark next to it. I choose Bob's field. It says, do you want to make this the active field? I say yes. And then I, make sure that it's going to say, well, what crop are you harvesting? Because we don't have a planting map for it. You're just doing custom harvesting here. So yeah, it's corn in this field, and I hit done. And now I can go ahead and I can start combining, and it's going to go ahead and collect this data and draw a field boundary based on where I drive the combine. So this allows you, if you're going to do custom combining, this is the way to do it. Add fields that just have field names with no field boundaries. Get to the field, select it so to make it the active field, do the combining, and then you'll have that data there. And then the other cool thing here, let me just disconnect Drive now that we've showed you how that works. Once you've done that, one of the cool things that you can do for the farmer is you can send him the yield map for that field. Maybe the farmer hasn't used FieldView before. I would highly recommend that if you're custom combining for someone, that you encourage them to get a free Climate FieldView account. So just go to climate.com and sign up for a free account that's got nothing in it. Or they can actually just download the app to their Android phone or their iPhone, and they'll create an account there. What they'll create is a blank account, and if they tell you what the email address is that they use to create that blank account, you can send the harvest file to them from the CAB app and then give them a call and say, hey, okay, I finished that field. The map is waiting for you on your phone. Just go ahead and click on go to that app, and you'll be able to see the harvest map for that field. It's a really nice value add for the farmer to be able to say, not only did I custom combine for you, but you've got the map, the yield map waiting for you on your phone to take a look at if you want to see where that yield came from. And the way that you do that is you go into settings, and you go into data, and inside of data you choose the year, like 2018, and then you choose the field that you custom combined, and you say this send 2018 data. So I say send 2018 data, and I say, you know what, this east field is the one I just custom combined for him. You put in his email address. It's, there's his email address, and it has to be the email address that he signed up with to create his free Climate account. But as long as you choose the right email address there, or put it in, and choose the field that you custom combined for him, you can then click the Send to Account button. And the Send to Account will send those field files to him so that they'll actually be waiting in his data inbox. He'll need to go to data inbox to import them, and he'll need to say, yeah, I really do want these to come in. But once he does, he can see those yield maps there that you did custom combining for him on those fields. Send field, on this page, there are 3 different options. There's send field files at the bottom. What that does is it actually sends DAT files that he has to then manually import. That's probably not what you want to do unless you're working with an agronomist or something like that. Send to account sends them directly to the Climate account, and send sharing key basically sends a sharing key that if the person you're working with is using SMS or SST or some sort of third-party software system and wants to use the files in there, a lot of those systems, we have a sharing functionality that as data is collected in Climate FieldView, it can be pushed to those third-party systems as well. So that's what the send sharing key is, just so that you know. But in general, the one that you're going to want to use when you're custom combining is send to account. It sends the data directly to that farmer's Climate account. He does have to click to approve it to make sure he really does want to see it in his account, but then he can view those maps pretty much immediately the minute that you leave the field and send them to him. Okay, I'm past my hour here, and I think that's most of what I wanted to cover. So let me just stop sharing here.